Sometimes the most powerful moments happen when no one expects them. In a world where every royal gesture is rehearsed and every public appearance is carefully choreographed, what happens when two people forget about the cameras, the protocols, and the watching world? What happens when a prince and princess become simply a husband and wife, sharing a moment so genuine that it reminds an entire nation why they fell in love with this couple in the first place? On an ordinary Tuesday morning in March 2024, something extraordinary happened. It wasn't planned by palace staff, wasn't part of any official engagement, and it certainly wasn't meant to be seen by millions. Yet this single moment, lasting barely 30 seconds, would become the most talked about royal moment of the year. It would make hardened journalists tear up, cause social media to explode with emotion, and remind the world that behind the titles and tiaras are two people whose love story continues to unfold in the most beautiful, unexpected ways. This is the story of that moment, and how a quiet gesture between William and Kate revealed something profound about love, duty, and what it truly means to be royal in the modern world. The morning of March 12th, 2024 began like any other at Kensington Palace. The sun barely peeked through the London clouds as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom mirror, carefully applying the last touches of her makeup. Her reflection showed a woman who had mastered the art of looking effortlessly elegant, though those closest to her knew the careful preparation that went into every public appearance. William was already downstairs, reviewing the day's schedule with his private secretary. Their agenda was packed with the usual royal duties: a visit to a children's hospital in the morning, followed by the opening of a new community center, and ending with a reception for military families. These were the kinds of engagements that had become second nature to them over their 13 years of marriage, the steady rhythm of royal life that the public had come to expect. Catherine descended the grand staircase of their apartment, her heels clicking softly against the marble steps. She wore a deep navy coat dress by one of her favorite designers, paired with simple pearl earrings that had belonged to Diana. It was a choice that spoke to her understanding of royal fashion, elegant enough to honor the occasions ahead, but not so formal as to intimidate the children they would meet. Ready for another day of smiling and waving? William asked with a gentle tease as she reached the bottom of the stairs. His own attire was impeccable as always, a charcoal gray suit with a regimental tie that nodded to his military background. At 41, the future king had grown into his role with a confidence that his younger self might not have imagined possible. Catherine smiled, straightening his tie with the automatic gesture of a wife who had performed this small act of care countless times. "When have we ever just smiled and waved?" she replied, her voice carrying the warmth that had made her beloved by the British public. "Today we listen to stories, we learn about challenges, and hopefully we make someone's day a little brighter." This was what made Catherine different from previous generations of royals. While she understood the importance of ceremony and tradition, she had redefined what it meant to be royal in the 21st century. Her approach was hands-on, genuine, and deeply human. She didn't just attend engagements. She connected with people in a way that felt authentic and lasting. The drive to St. Mary's Children's Hospital took them through the heart of London. Catherine watched the city wake up outside her window, commuters hurrying to work, shop owners opening their doors, children walking to school with parents. This was the Britain she served, the real lives behind the statistics and policy papers that crossed their desks at the palace. "Do you remember our first hospital visit together?" she asked William as their car wound through traffic. It had been in 2011, just months after their wedding, when everything felt overwhelming and new. Catherine had been terrified of saying the wrong thing, of not knowing the proper protocol, of disappointing the people who had placed such faith in them. William reached over and squeezed her hand. "You were convinced you'd forget everyone's names and accidentally insult someone," he recalled with a soft laugh. "Instead, you spent an hour playing with the children in the cancer ward and made that little boy laugh for the first time since his diagnosis." It was moments like these that reminded them both how far they had come. The nervous young couple who had stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace on their wedding day had evolved into confident, experienced working royals who understood their power to make a real difference in people's lives. As their convoy pulled into the hospital's main entrance, Catherine could see the familiar sight of photographers and royal watchers gathered behind barriers. After all these years, she had learned to see past the cameras to the real purpose of their visit. The media attention might seem overwhelming, but it served a greater purpose, bringing attention to causes that might otherwise go unnoticed, highlighting the incredible work being done by ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. Dr. Sarah Matthews, the hospital's chief pediatrician, greeted them at the entrance. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an easy smile, the sort of person who had dedicated her life to healing children and supporting families through their darkest moments. Catherine had met her several times over the years and had come to deeply respect her work. "Your Royal Highnesses, welcome back to St. Mary's," Dr. Matthews said, offering a slight bow. "The children are absolutely thrilled that you're here. We've arranged for you to visit several wards, and there are some very special young people who are eager to meet you." As they walked through the hospital's bright, cheerfully decorated corridors, Catherine felt the familiar mixture of privilege and responsibility that came with these visits. They passed walls covered with children's artwork and photos of young patients who had overcome incredible challenges. Each image told a story of courage, resilience, and hope. Their first stop was the pediatric cancer ward, where they met 8-year-old Emma, who had been fighting leukemia for 2 years. Despite her bald head and the medical equipment surrounding her bed, Emma's eyes sparkled with excitement as Catherine approached. The little girl had been following the royal family's activities through news reports and social media, and meeting the Princess of Wales in person felt like meeting a real-life princess from her favorite fairy tales. "Are you really married to a prince?" Emma asked with the directness that only children possess. The question drew laughter from the nurses and doctors gathered around the bed, but Catherine answered with complete seriousness. "I am," she said, settling into the chair beside Emma's bed. "And do you know what the best part about marrying a prince is? It means I get to meet brave princesses like you." Emma beamed at the compliment, and Catherine spent the next 20 minutes hearing about the girl's treatment, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian, and her excitement about returning to school once her chemotherapy was complete. William stood nearby, occasionally joining the conversation, but mostly observing his wife's natural ability to connect with children facing unimaginable challenges. This was Catherine at her best, not performing for cameras or following a script, but simply being present with another human being who needed to feel seen and valued. Her genuine interest in Emma's life, her thoughtful questions about the girl's treatment, and hopes for the future demonstrated the kind of royal engagement that could truly make a difference. From the cancer ward, they moved to the neonatal intensive care unit, where they met premature babies and their exhausted parents. Here, Catherine's own experience as a mother became particularly relevant. She spoke with new fathers about the overwhelming nature of having a child in intensive care, and with mothers about the guilt and fear that came with having a baby who needed so much medical support to survive. "When George was born, I thought I knew what tiredness felt like," she told one mother whose twins had been born at 28 weeks. "But nothing prepares you for those first few weeks of parenthood, especially when your children need extra care. You're doing an incredible job." The mother, whose name was Jennifer, began to cry as Catherine spoke, not from sadness, but from the relief of being acknowledged and understood by someone whose own children were healthy and thriving. It was a moment of genuine human connection that transcended titles and status. William watched these interactions with admiration and pride. After more than a decade of marriage, he continued to be amazed by Catherine's ability to find exactly the right words, to offer comfort without being condescending, and to make every person they met feel like the most important person in the room. As their hospital visit continued, they moved through different wards, meeting children with various conditions and their families. There was Marcus, a teenager with cystic fibrosis who wanted to discuss climate change policy with William. There was little Amara, who had undergone heart surgery and wanted to show Catherine the drawing she had made of the royal family. Each encounter was meaningful, personal, and genuine. But it was during their visit to the children's rehabilitation unit that the day took an unexpected turn. They were introduced to 7-year-old Lily, who had been in a car accident that left her partially paralyzed. Lily was working with physical therapists to regain movement in her legs, a process that was slow, painful, and often discouraging for such a young child. When Catherine knelt beside Lily's wheelchair, the little girl immediately reached out to touch the princess's hair. "It's so pretty," Lily said with wonder. "My hair fell out during one of my surgeries, but it's growing back now." Catherine's heart clenched as she looked at this brave child who was facing challenges that no 7-year-old should have to endure. Without hesitation, she reached up and removed one of her pearl earrings, placing it gently in Lily's small hand. "These belong to someone very special," Catherine said softly. "Someone who believed that even in difficult times, we can find beauty and hope. I want you to keep this as a reminder that you are beautiful, brave, and loved." Lily clutched the earring tightly, her eyes filling with tears of joy rather than sadness. The gesture was spontaneous, unplanned, and completely authentic. It was also captured by a photographer from the hospital's communications team, though Catherine had no awareness of being photographed in that moment. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Dr. Matthews walked with them toward the exit. "Your visit means more than you know," she told them. "These children face such difficult challenges, and your time with them reminds them that they matter, that their struggles are seen and acknowledged." William and Catherine exchanged a look that spoke volumes about their shared commitment to this work. They understood that their privilege came with responsibility, and that their platform could be used to bring attention, comfort, and hope to those who needed it most. The drive to their next engagement was quieter than usual. Both of them were processing the emotional weight of what they had just experienced. Catherine absently touched her remaining earring, thinking about Lily and hoping that their visit had provided some small measure of comfort and encouragement. "You gave away Diana's earring," William said gently, not as a criticism, but as an observation of the significance of the gesture. Catherine nodded. "She would have wanted it to bring someone joy," she replied simply. "And did you see Lily's face? That's exactly what happened." This was the nature of their partnership. William understanding that Catherine's instincts for compassion were not just personal qualities, but essential elements of effective royal service. She, in turn, appreciated his steady support and his own deep commitment to their shared work. As their car pulled up to the community center for their next engagement, Catherine took a deep breath and prepared to shift her focus to the next group of people who deserve their complete attention. The afternoon would bring its own challenges and rewards, its own opportunities to listen, learn, and hopefully make a positive difference. Little did they know that the photograph of Catherine giving her earring to Lily would soon make its way beyond the hospital's walls, beginning a chain of events that would culminate in that extraordinary moment that would leave a nation in awe. For now, they simply moved forward with their day, carrying with them the memories of brave children and dedicated medical staff, and the quiet satisfaction of work that felt meaningful and important. The community center opening felt different from their hospital visit, though William and Catherine couldn't quite identify why as they stepped out of their car onto the bustling street in East London. Perhaps it was the energy of the crowd, or maybe the way the afternoon sunlight cast everything in a golden glow that made the moment feel particularly significant. The Riverside Community Center had been 3 years in the making, a project born from local determination to create a safe space for children and families in one of London's most economically challenged neighborhoods. The building itself was modest but welcoming, with large windows that let in natural light and colorful murals painted by local artists covering the exterior walls. Amira Patel, the center's director, greeted them at the entrance with barely contained excitement. She was a woman in her early 30s who had grown up in this very neighborhood, and had dedicated her career to community development. Her passion for the project was evident in every word as she began explaining the center's mission. "This isn't just a building, Your Royal Highnesses," Amira explained as she led them inside. "This is hope made concrete. We've created programs for literacy, job training, mental health support, and childcare. But most importantly, we've created a place where people know they belong." As they toured the facility, Catherine found herself particularly drawn to the children's area, where a group of young people were engaged in an art therapy session. The instructor, a gentlewoman named Claire, was helping the children express their emotions through painting and drawing. Catherine observed quietly for several minutes, watching how art became a language for feelings that might otherwise remain hidden. "We see children here who carry burdens that adults struggle with," Claire explained quietly to Catherine. "Art gives them a way to process trauma, fear, and uncertainty. Sometimes a painting can say what words cannot." One little boy, who couldn't have been more than 6 years old, was working on a piece that showed a house with broken windows being repaired by figures with paintbrushes. When Catherine asked him about his artwork, he explained that it represented his family fixing their home after a difficult time. "We're making everything better," he said with the optimism that children somehow manage to maintain even in difficult circumstances. "My mom says that broken things can become beautiful again if we work together." The wisdom in this child's words struck Catherine deeply. Here was a fundamental truth about resilience and community expressed with the clarity that only comes from lived experience. She knelt down to the boy's eye level, studying his painting with genuine interest. "You're absolutely right," she told him. "Sometimes the most beautiful things come from fixing what was broken. Your painting shows how strong and creative you are." Meanwhile, William was in another part of the center, speaking with teenagers who were participating in a job training program. These young people, aged 16 to 19, were learning practical skills like electrical work, plumbing, and digital marketing that would help them find stable employment in their community. Marcus, an 18-year-old who had aged out of the foster care system, was particularly articulate about what the program meant to him. "Before coming here, I felt like I was invisible," he told William. "Like society had written me off because of my circumstances. This place showed me that my background doesn't define my future." William listened intently as Marcus described his plans to start his own electrical business, his goals for saving money, and his dreams of eventually buying a small flat in the neighborhood where he had grown up. The conversation reminded William of his own youth, though his circumstances had been vastly different. The drive to make something meaningful of one's life, however, was universal. "What advice would you give to other young people in similar situations?" William asked, genuinely curious about Marcus's perspective. "Don't wait for permission to believe in yourself," Marcus replied without hesitation. "I used to think I needed someone else to tell me I was worth investing in. But the truth is, you have to start with believing it yourself. Then, you find people like Ms. Patel who will help you make it happen." As the afternoon progressed, William and Catherine reconvened to participate in the center's official opening ceremony. The main hall was filled with local residents, community leaders, and the children and families who would benefit from the center's programs. The atmosphere was celebratory, but also deeply emotional, as many people in attendance had been involved in the long struggle to make this dream a reality. Amira Patel took the stage first, her voice carrying across the packed room as she told the story of how the community had come together to create this space. She spoke about the fundraising challenges, the bureaucratic obstacles, and the moments when success seemed impossible. But she also spoke about the power of collective determination and the belief that every community deserved a place where people could gather, grow, and thrive. 3 years ago, this was just an empty lot where children played among weeds and broken glass, Amira said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Today, it's a testament to what happens when a community refuses to accept that their circumstances are permanent. We didn't wait for someone else to solve our problems. We became the solution. When William was invited to speak, he chose to focus on what he had observed during his time at the center. Rather than delivering standard remarks about community development, he spoke specifically about the young people he had met and the lessons they had taught him. "I came here today thinking I was here to support your community," he began, his voice carrying across the quiet room. "But what I've discovered is that your community has supported me. The young people I've met have reminded me about courage, resilience, and the power of believing in tomorrow even when today feels challenging." He went on to speak about Marcus's entrepreneurial dreams, about the children in the art therapy program who were turning their experiences into beautiful expressions of hope, and about the parents who were investing in their own education to create better opportunities for their families. "This center represents the best of what we can achieve when we work together," William continued. "But more than that, it represents the best of who we are as people. You've built more than a building here. You've built a foundation for the future." When Catherine was invited to officially cut the ribbon, she paused before approaching the symbolic barrier that would mark the center's official opening. Looking out at the assembled crowd, she saw faces that reflected every stage of life, every kind of struggle, and every form of hope. "Before I cut this ribbon, I want to say something," Catherine said, her voice clear and strong. "What I've witnessed here today isn't just about programs or services, though those are incredibly important. What I've witnessed is a community that has chosen to invest in each other. That's not something that can be built with funding or government programs alone. That requires something much more powerful. It requires love." As she spoke these words, something shifted in the room. The formal nature of the royal visit seemed to dissolve, replaced by something more intimate and genuine. Catherine was no longer just fulfilling an official duty. She was sharing a moment of authentic connection with people whose lives had touched her heart. "Every child I met today, every parent, every volunteer, every staff member has shown me what it means to be part of a community that cares for one another. You've reminded me that the most important titles we can hold are not the ones we're given by institutions, but the ones we earn through how we treat each other: neighbor, friend, helper, supporter." When she finally cut the ribbon, the cheer that went up from the crowd was different from the polite applause that usually accompanied royal engagements. This was celebration mixed with genuine emotion, recognition that something meaningful had been acknowledged and honored. As the formal ceremony concluded and people began to mingle and explore the center's facilities, Catherine found herself drawn into conversations that felt more like visits with friends than official royal interactions. She spoke with grandmothers who were taking computer classes, fathers who were learning parenting skills, and teenagers who were discovering talents they never knew they possessed. One conversation in particular stood out. Mrs. Morrison, a woman in her 70s who had lived in the neighborhood for 50 years, approached Catherine with tears in her eyes. "I want to thank you for seeing us," Mrs. Morrison said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Not just looking at us, but really seeing us. For so many years, people wrote off our community as a problem to be solved rather than a place where real people live real lives. You've seen our strength, not just our struggles." Catherine felt her own eyes fill with tears as she listened to Mrs. Morrison's words. This was exactly why their work mattered. Not for the photo opportunities or the positive press coverage, but for moments like these when genuine human connection transcended the barriers of status and circumstance. "Thank you for welcoming us into your community," Catherine replied, taking Mrs. Morrison's hands in her own. "You've reminded me why this work is so important, and you've shown me strength and grace that I'll carry with me long after today." As William and Catherine prepared to leave the community center, they were approached by a group of children who had been participating in the day's activities. The children had worked together to create a thank you card that featured drawings and messages from everyone in their group. "We made this for you," said a little girl named Zara, presenting the handmade card with pride. "We wanted you to remember us." William knelt down to accept the card, studying each drawing and reading several of the messages aloud. The artwork was simple but heartfelt. Pictures of the royal couple surrounded by rainbows, flowers, and words like "thank you" kindness, and friends. "This is beautiful," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "We will definitely remember you. But more importantly, we hope you'll remember how special you are and how much your community believes in you." As their car pulled away from the community center, both William and Catherine were unusually quiet, processing the emotional weight of the day's experiences. They had started the morning at a hospital, witnessing children facing medical challenges with incredible courage. They had ended the afternoon in a community center, observing people working together to create opportunities and hope. "Days like today remind me why we do this work," Catherine said finally, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "It's not about the ceremonies or the protocols. It's about moments when we can genuinely connect with people and hopefully make them feel seen and valued." William nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. After years of royal duties, they had both learned to distinguish between engagements that felt meaningful and those that felt merely ceremonial. Today had definitely fallen into the first category. Neither of them could have predicted that their evening engagement would bring an entirely different kind of emotional intensity, or that a photographer's candid shot would soon capture a moment that would remind the entire nation why William and Catherine had earned such a special place in the public's heart. For now, they simply sat together in comfortable companionship, watching London pass by outside their windows, carrying with them the stories and faces of the remarkable people they had met throughout the day. The evening reception for military families was scheduled to take place at Wellington Barracks, a venue that held special significance for both William and Catherine. For William, it represented his own military service and his continued connection to the armed forces as their patron. For Catherine, it had become a place where she had learned to understand the unique challenges faced by military spouses and children. As her car approached the barracks, Catherine noticed that the usual crowd of photographers and royal watchers seemed smaller than expected. Their day had been long and emotionally intensive, and she found herself grateful for what appeared to be a more intimate gathering. Colonel Sarah Davies, the evening's host, greeted them at the entrance with military precision softened by genuine warmth. She had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and now worked to support military families dealing with deployment, injury, and the complex process of transitioning back to civilian life. "Your Royal Highnesses, welcome to what I hope will be a relaxed evening," Colonel Davies said as she escorted them into the reception hall. "We have about 60 families here tonight, representing all branches of the armed services. Some are dealing with recent deployments, others are navigating injuries sustained in service, and several are celebrating successful transitions to civilian careers." The reception hall had been decorated simply but thoughtfully, with regimental flags representing different units and photo displays showing military families at various stages of their service journeys. Round tables were arranged to encourage conversation, and a small area had been set up where children could play while their parents socialized. As William and Catherine entered the main reception area, they were struck by the atmosphere of genuine camaraderie among the guests. These were families who understood each other's experiences in ways that others might not, united by the common thread of military service and its impact on family life. Their first conversation was with Captain James Mitchell and his wife Sarah, whose 8-year-old son Tommy had been struggling with his father's recent return from a 6-month deployment. The family dynamics had shifted during James's absence, and they were working to find their new normal as a complete family unit again. "The hardest part isn't the separation during deployment," Sarah Mitchell explained to Catherine as they watched Tommy play with other military children. "It's figuring out how to be a family again when everyone has grown and changed during the time apart." Catherine nodded with understanding, though her own experience of William's military service had been different. She remembered the anxiety of his search and rescue missions, the worry that came with knowing he was flying dangerous missions, and the adjustment periods when he returned from training exercises or deployments. How do you help Tommy process his feelings about his father being away and then coming home again? Catherine asked, genuinely interested in learning from Sarah's experience. We've learned to be very honest with him about our emotions, Sarah replied. When I was scared or lonely while James was deployed, I didn't pretend everything was fine. We talked about missing Daddy, about being proud of his service, and about how families can love each other even when they're apart. Meanwhile, William was engaged in conversation with Sergeant Major Robert Thompson, a veteran who had lost his leg in an IED explosion in Syria and was now working as a motivational speaker for other wounded veterans. Robert's wife, Emma, had become an advocate for military families, particularly those dealing with life-changing injuries. The physical recovery was actually the easier part, Robert told William with characteristic military directness. Learning to navigate the world with a prosthetic, dealing with phantom pain, adjusting to new limitations. Those are challenges with clear solutions. The harder part was accepting help and admitting that I couldn't do everything the same way I used to. William listened intently, remembering his own experiences visiting wounded service members in hospital and his ongoing work with veterans organizations. Each conversation reminded him of the incredible resilience of military personnel and their families, but also of the ongoing support they needed long after their service ended. What would you want people to understand about military families? William asked Robert, knowing that the veteran's perspective could inform his own advocacy work. We're not heroes or victims, Robert replied thoughtfully. We're people who chose to serve, and sometimes that service comes with costs. What we need isn't pity or excessive praise. We need practical support, understanding employers, and communities that see us as contributors, not charity cases. As the evening progressed, William and Catherine moved naturally through the reception, joining different conversations and listening to a wide variety of experiences. They met Lieutenant Angela Foster, a single mother who had served in Iraq while her daughter lived with grandparents. They spoke with Corporal Michael Chun, whose family had immigrated from Hong Kong and whose military service had become a bridge between his parents' traditional values and his own British identity. Each conversation revealed the complexity and diversity of military family experiences. There were stories of pride and sacrifice, challenge and resilience, separation and reunion. What struck both William and Catherine was how these families had developed their own support networks, creating extended family relationships with other military families who understood their unique circumstances. During dinner, Catherine found herself seated next to Linda Walsh, whose husband had been killed in action in Afghanistan 2 years earlier. Linda was attending the reception with her teenage daughter Michelle, and both were part of a support group for military widows and their children. People always ask me how I'm doing, which I appreciate, Linda told Catherine as they shared a quiet moment during the meal. But what they don't realize is that grief isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to carry. David's death changed us forever, but it didn't end our story. Michelle and I are building a new life that honors his memory while still being open to joy and possibility. Catherine was moved by Linda's wisdom and strength, and by the way Michelle had grown into a poised young woman despite experiencing such profound loss at a formative age. Their conversation reminded her that military service affected not just those who wore the uniform, but entire families who shared in both the pride and the risks of that service. What has surprised you most about this journey? Catherine asked Linda, wanting to understand how someone navigates such a fundamental change in their life's trajectory. How much strength I didn't know I had, Linda replied without hesitation. And how many people, many of them strangers, have shown up to support us. The military community doesn't just serve together. We heal together too. As the formal portion of the evening concluded, guests began to mingle more freely, and the children who had been playing in their designated area joined their parents for dessert and informal conversation. It was during this transition that the moment occurred, the quiet gesture that would soon captivate a nation and remind everyone why William and Catherine had earned such deep public affection. Catherine was speaking with a group of military spouses when she noticed a little girl sitting alone at one of the children's tables, looking overwhelmed by the social activity around her. The child appeared to be about 5 years old, with curly red hair and freckles, wearing a dress that suggested someone had taken special care to make her look nice for the evening. Without interrupting her conversation or making a show of her actions, Catherine quietly excused herself and approached the little girl's table. She knelt down beside the child's chair, bringing herself to eye level in the way she had mastered during her years of engaging with children. "Hi there," Catherine said softly, her voice carrying just enough warmth to be inviting without being overwhelming. "I am Catherine. What's your name?" The little girl looked up with wide eyes, clearly recognizing Catherine, but not quite sure how to respond to finding herself in conversation with the Princess of Wales. "I'm Sophie," she said quietly. "My daddy is a soldier." "That's wonderful," Catherine replied, settling more comfortably beside Sophie's chair. "Being a soldier's daughter is a very special job. Can you tell me about your daddy?" As Sophie began to talk about her father's recent deployment and her excitement about his upcoming return, Catherine listened with complete attention. She didn't look around to see who might be watching, didn't check the time, and didn't seem to be thinking about anything other than this conversation with a little girl who needed someone to notice her. William, who had been across the room speaking with Colonel Davies, became aware of what Catherine was doing and found himself pausing his own conversation to observe. After more than a decade of marriage, he never stopped being amazed by his wife's intuitive ability to identify and respond to emotional needs that others might miss. Sophie was explaining that she had made a drawing for her father, but was worried it wasn't good enough when Catherine did something that surprised everyone who witnessed it. She reached into her small evening purse and pulled out a fountain pen, the kind used for signing official documents and guest books. "Would you like to add something special to your drawing with this?" Catherine asked Sophie, offering her the elegant pen. "This pen has signed very important papers, but I think signing your artwork for your daddy would be the most important job it's ever had." Sophie's face lit up with joy as she carefully took the pen and added her signature to the drawing she had made. But then Catherine did something even more unexpected. She asked Sophie if she could borrow a crayon from the art supplies on the children's table. Taking a bright red crayon, Catherine added a small heart to Sophie's drawing and signed her own name next to it. "Now your daddy will know that a princess thinks his little girl is very special," Catherine said with a smile. It was at this moment that a photographer from the military's official communications team, who had been documenting the evening's events, captured the shot that would soon be seen around the world. The image showed Catherine, elegant in her evening attire, kneeling on the floor of a military reception hall, coloring with a 5-year-old girl while other guests continued their conversations around them. But the photographer, Tom Richardson, who had covered military events for 15 years, knew he had captured something extraordinary. The image wasn't just about a royal engaging with a child. It was about two people separated by decades and circumstances sharing a moment of pure human connection. As Catherine finished helping Sophie with her drawing, the little girl spontaneously threw her arms around the princess's neck in a hug that was both innocent and deeply touching. Catherine returned the embrace with genuine warmth, and for those few seconds, the formal reception hall became simply a place where a kind adult was making a child feel special and seen. "Thank you for making my picture beautiful," Sophie whispered into Catherine's ear during their hug. "Thank you for reminding me what's really important," Catherine whispered back, meaning every word. When Catherine rejoined the adult conversations, she carried with her not just the memory of a sweet interaction with a child, but a renewed sense of purpose about her role and responsibility. These were the moments that made all the protocol and formality worthwhile, moments when she could use her position to bring joy, comfort, and attention to people who deserve to be celebrated. William approached her as the evening was winding down, and their eyes met across the room in one of those wordless communications that long-married couples master. He had seen what she had done with Sophie, and his expression conveyed both admiration and deep love for the woman who continued to surprise him with her capacity for genuine kindness. "Ready to go home?" he asked quietly, though they both knew the evening had given them much to think about during their drive back to Kensington Palace. As they said their goodbyes to Colonel Davies and the military families, Catherine found herself hugged by several children and thanked by numerous parents for taking the time to really engage with their families. These weren't perfunctory interactions, but genuine expressions of gratitude for feeling seen and valued. The drive home was quiet, with both William and Catherine processing the emotional intensity of a day that had included hospitals, community centers, and military families. They had been reminded in different ways throughout the day of their privilege to serve and their responsibility to use their platform thoughtfully and meaningfully. Neither of them knew that Tom Richardson's photograph was already making its way through the military's communications channels, and that by morning it would begin a journey that would touch hearts across Britain and around the world. They simply went home to their own children, carrying with them the stories and faces of the remarkable people they had met, and the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent in service to others.